Do you think the history of humanity is just boring dates and understandable facts? How about discoveries that are literally imprinted in ancient rocks and have scientists arguing for decades? We are used to thinking that the past has long been studied, the first humans, simple tools, and gradual development. But few know that true anomalies hide behind this beautiful picture. Giant footprints in stones and strange objects in mines have often left science at a dead end, proving that we know almost nothing about our ancestors. Today, we will discover how a huge footprint ended up on a steep cliff that is billions of years old. We will understand why official science often closes its eyes to such facts, and we will see evidence that completely shatters our ideas about time. And right at the very end, you will understand why these footprints are considered archaeology's main mystery, how humanity manages to find an explanation where logic is powerless, and what nature truly hides from us. Ready to rewrite history? We begin our trip into the past. In the early 20th century, a local hunter was making his way through dense bushes in the Mpumalanga region. South Africa was scorching that day. The hunter was tracking game and decided to climb a high granite rock to inspect the surroundings. Clinging to the ledges with his fingers, he climbed the steep slope and suddenly froze. Right in front of his face, on the vertical wall, a giant footprint of a left human foot was displayed. The man reached out to the stone and touched the depression. His entire palm disappeared into the thumb mark, which looked as if a giant had stepped in soft clay just a minute ago. Today, this object is known as the Goliath footprint. Its length is 120 centimeters, but the most impressive thing is its position. The footprint froze vertically, as if the giant was walking straight up the wall. Geologists explain this absurdity simply. The Mpumalanga region is one of the oldest cores of the Earth's crust. Over billions of years, tectonic plates made unthinkable movements. They literally broke layers of rock and turned them 90 degrees. What was once a horizontal trail turned into a steep and inaccessible cliff. Later, researchers climbed this plateau. They began to study every centimeter of the discovery and noticed a critical detail. One of the scientists ran his hand along the edges of the footprint and felt distinct stone protrusions. It was not a straight cut with a tool. The granite looked as if a viscous mass had been squeezed to the sides under a monstrous weight. Neither wind nor water, nor an ancient master with a chisel could imitate such deformation in a hard rock. Here, we face a technical paradox. By the laws of physics, granite is born deep in the bowels of the earth. It solidifies under enormous pressure at a temperature of hundreds of degrees. But for a clear footprint to remain on it, the rock would have to be on the surface itself, and at the same time maintain the consistency of warm Play-Doh. Official science cannot clearly explain how granite could remain soft in an era when the atmosphere had not even formed on the planet yet. The depth of the depression in the heel area reaches several centimeters. Calculations show that to sink the stone in this way, the creature would have to weigh tens of tons. If we maintain the proportions of a human, its height would reach 9 meters. Skeptics call this a trick of erosion, but look closer. The anatomical precision of 5 toes and the perfect curve of the foot arch seem too flawless for a caprice of nature. It is as if this footprint had been imprinted in the most resistant material on the planet so it could cross eternity. It makes us doubt every word in the textbooks, and the most alarming thing is that the Goliath of South Africa was not alone. Similar footprints are found all over the globe. If the African giant of Ampaloosi seems like a fantasy, the discovery in Tanzania is the foundation of science. In the late 70s, Mary Leakey's expedition made a world-class discovery. In the Laetoli region, they discovered a chain of footprints, literally frozen in time. They are not just footprints, they are genuine evidence of how our history began. 3.5 million years ago, the eruption of the Solidified volcano occurred here. A huge cloud of ash covered the savanna. All living things turned into a gray desert. But then a short tropical rain fell. It turned the layers of dust into a viscous semblance of fresh cement. The hot African sun quickly dried this mass. It turned into a tough tuff. Thus, nature created a unique frozen frame of the life of our distant ancestors. They walked this earth long before the appearance of the first man. The importance of Laetoli cannot be overestimated. The chain of 70 footprints belongs to 3 individuals. They walked confidently in one direction. The most impressive thing was revealed in the detailed analysis. Their gait hardly differed from ours. These creatures already had a clearly expressed foot arch. The big toe was not turned to the side for climbing, like in monkeys. It looked strictly forward. This became overwhelming evidence for scientists. Our ancestors stood on 2 legs long before their brains began to grow. The conclusion is simple. First, we learned to walk, and only then to think. A true dramatic story is hidden in the details of this discovery. One of the walkers was significantly larger than the others, and another stepped exactly in their footprints. Whether it was an ancient game, an attempt to make the path easier for themselves, or a conscious imitation of the leader, we do not know. But on that fateful day, antelopes and ancient horses ran next to them. There were even saber-toothed cats. Their paws also froze in this stone archive. This discovery posed a very complex question to science. Why was the evolution of the foot completed so quickly and effectively? Meanwhile, the rest of the body continued to change for millions of years. Laetoli reminds us, some parts of our past have already been deciphered, but we are only just beginning to realize their true meaning. In 2021, a group of biologists was working in the New Mexico desert. They were studying the landscape of White Sands National Park. One of the researchers crouched at the edge of the gypsum dune and began to carefully sweep away the layer of white dust. Under his hand emerged a clear outline of a human foot, then another and another. Before him stretched an endless path of footprints that obeyed no logic. These footprints froze in layers of mud thousands of years ago. Once life teemed here. It was the peak of the Ice Age. Along with the human footprints in the ground, prints of enormous mammoth paws and giant sloths were preserved.
But the most vivid detail is the children's footprints. Judging by the chaotic direction, they were happily running after each other. They jumped in puddles and spun in place. While the adults nearby engaged in heavy labor, the children simply enjoyed the moment. These small footprints turned dry archaeology into a living drama. The sensation awaited the scientists a little later. In the laboratory, one of the specialists carefully extracted a tiny seed from under the heel of a child's footprint. They were seeds of an aquatic plant, ditch grass. Radiocarbon analysis generated numbers that were initially considered an equipment failure. 23,000 years. The results of the analysis in New Mexico proved extremely unexpected. Until that moment, all textbooks claimed the same thing. The first human arrived in America a maximum of 13,000 years ago. 10,000 years of difference is not just a mistake, it is an entire abyss. It turns out that humanity colonized the continent twice as early as generally believed. The new data caused heated disputes. Skeptics did not give up. They argued that the seeds might have absorbed ancient carbon from the water and distorted the result, but scientists conducted repeated tests. The footprints in New Mexico became irrefutable proof. People thrived in the New World even at the peak of the Great Glaciation. White Sands showed us that history is much deeper. Our ancestors were much more resilient and agile than we used to think. But if the discoveries in America only shift the dates by thousands of years, the evidence from Europe literally shatters the theory of evolution. We were used to thinking that our ancestors left Africa relatively recently. However, the island of Crete holds evidence that leaves scientists speechless. While official science continues to look for the origins of humanity exclusively in the warm savannas of Africa, a chance discovery on the Greek island of Crete made the anthropology world shudder. This happened in 2002. Polish researcher Gerard Gierlinski, on a normal vacation, was walking along the west coast near the village of Trachylos. On a coastal cliff, he noticed strange rhythmic depressions. Upon closer examination, they revealed a chain of 40 clear footprints. These footprints solidified in ancient sedimentary rocks right by the sea. When scientists performed the dating, the result sounded like thunder in a clear sky. The age of the rock was an incredible 5,700,000 years. At that time, this seemed impossible. The discovery pushed the appearance of creatures with a human foot in Europe millions of years before all existing theories. But it is important to consider a geographical fact. Almost 6 million years ago, Crete was not yet an island. It was part of a huge, unified continent. Ancient wanderers could move freely through these lands over colossal distances without encountering water obstacles. The analysis of these footprints brought even more surprises. The shape of the Trachylos foot turned out to be frighteningly modern. In the same period, in Africa, lived the famous Australopithecus, like Lucy. But their feet still retained the characteristics of monkey paws with long, curved toes. The Crete footprint, however, shows a completely different picture. We see short toes and a strong big toe. It is firmly pressed against the others and not turned to the side for climbing trees. On the heel and the front part of the sole, pressure marks are clearly visible. They are characteristic only of a bipedal being that moves confidently on hard, open terrain. This means one thing. Almost 6 million years ago, in the territory of modern Europe, those whose gait was practically identical to ours already roamed. Such a discovery generated a truly bold theory. Perhaps the cradle of humanity was not tied to a single point on the map. Such discoveries make the history of our evolution much more complex and interesting. Scientists have to admit that the development of different branches of humanity may have occurred in parallel on several continents at the same time. The Trachylos discovery remains the most inconvenient fact for classical science. It does not fit into the simple and familiar models of the past. These stone paths on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea are an eternal reminder. Our ancestors began to master the planet much earlier and more boldly than we could have imagined.
In June 1968, an ordinary collector, William Meister, made a discovery that almost destroyed the foundation of historical science. While in the state of Utah, he cracked a piece of shale and froze. Inside the stone hid something impossible. Before him was a clear impression resembling a shoe print with a characteristic heel. Right in the center of the print were the remains of a trilobite, a tiny marine creature that went extinct hundreds of millions of years ago. Defenders of alternative history see in this chip the outline of a shoe that stepped on a trilobite. At that time, there were not even dinosaurs on Earth, and the only masters of the planet were considered to be primitive fish and insects. This story instantly spread around the world, generating endless disputes. The main argument of official science sounds prosaic. What we have before us is not the boot of a time traveler, but a caprice of nature. Geologists explain this as a natural rock chip or a special growth of minerals. From their point of view, over hundreds of millions of years, erosion and pressure are capable of creating any figure, and the human eye simply looks for familiar outlines where they do not exist. However, defenders of alternative versions point to the remarkable symmetry of the discovery. The edges of the print are too smooth for an accidental chip, and the position of the trilobite looks like the result of an accidental step.
If we admit that the artifact is genuine, the history of the emergence of the first intelligent beings will have to be completely revised. Despite the skepticism of experts, the Meister footprint remains one of the most famous anomalies. This strange stone from Utah continues to excite minds, forcing everyone to decide for themselves. Are we dealing with history's greatest mystery or a successful joke of nature? If the Meister discovery suggests human presence in the era of the first fish, then the next enigma takes us to the Mesozoic, the golden age of reptiles. Could our ancestors have shared trails with the most dangerous predators in Earth's history? The answer to this question was sought for decades in the state of Texas. In the mid-20th century, news spread around the world worthy of a science fiction movie script. In the state of Texas, at the bottom of the Paluxy River, after a severe drought, hundreds of dinosaur footprints were exposed. But next to them, researchers discovered something inexplicable. In the exact same layers of limestone whose ages exceed 100 million years, chains of human feet could clearly be seen. For a long time, people tried to figure out if our ancestors could have encountered real dinosaurs. Some footprints reached 50 centimeters in length. The unusual footprints in the Paluxy Valley gave rise to many bold hypotheses, including the most fantastic ones. The discovery caused a storm in the scientific community. Experts from all over the world arrived at the banks of the Paluxy. A careful study of the stone revealed facts that quickly cooled the ardor of the defenders of sensations. It was discovered that many of the human footprints actually belonged to three-toed dinosaurs. Over time, their footprints were eroded by water and filled with silt. Due to erosion, the middle toe of the reptile became less visible and the side ones merged. This created the perfect illusion of a wide human heel. Furthermore, during the years of the Great Depression, enterprising local residents carved toes into the stones themselves to sell artifacts to tourists. Despite the exposure, the history of the Paluxy Valley remains an important lesson. Nature is capable of playing with our perception, imitating biological forms with frightening precision. And although the battles of giants with dinosaurs have not found scientific confirmation, the debates surrounding individual footprints in Texas do not diminish. These discoveries teach us to be cautious. The line between a real discovery and a natural mirage is sometimes very thin.
Looking at a footprint 120 centimeters long, the imagination instantly draws a giant, a creature the height of a three-story house, which easily steps over mountain ranges. But if we transport such a giant from a fairy tale to the real world, it would die immediately. It would be killed by the severe and relentless laws of physics. There is the fundamental square-cube law. It states, if you increase a person's height several times, their weight must increase many times over. Mass grows catastrophically faster than tissue strength. The bones of a 10-meter titan simply would not support its own weight. They would turn to dust at the first attempt to take a step. The cardiovascular system would face an unsolvable task. To elevate blood from the feet to the head, to the height of 3 stories, the heart would have to create a pressure capable of rupturing ordinary vessels. And the muscles, with such dimensions, would become so heavy that they could not even lift the leg off the ground. Earth's gravity presents a strict ultimatum to any biped. For the Ampaloosi giant to physically exist, its skeleton would have to be not of calcium, but of ultra-resistant metal. Or perhaps in those times, gravity on Earth worked in some other way. Look at the largest creatures in history, the dinosaurs. Nature found a solution. They always distributed their weight on 4 enormous limbs. Furthermore, their bones were hollow and filled with air. For a bipedal creature weighing 30 tons, any jump or even a careless step would end in instant catastrophe. This forces serious researchers to look for other, more earthly answers. The most convincing version sounds prosaic. Nature is the greatest mystifier in history. In the deep past, the surface of our planet was extremely unstable. Rocks were in a semi-liquid and viscous state due to colossal heat and excess moisture. Imagine huge gas bubbles bursting from the incandescent bowels through a layer of soft clay. The hot mud twists into bizarre funnels under the action of steam.
Millions of years later, erosion, wind, and rainwater conclude what was started. They polished these voids, transforming them into a frightening semblance of human heels and toes. There are also rarer phenomena. Inside solid granite, lenses of soft minerals are often found. Water has washed them for centuries, molecule by molecule. As a result, cavities of almost perfect anatomical shape remain in the rock. Our brain is programmed to look for familiar images in chaos. We see a giant's footprint, where in reality, only the elements worked: the wind, the water, and infinite time. Here are our planet's best master forgers. Our trip following the footprints of the past proves the planet holds many more secrets than recorded in official chronicles. The giant footprint in Ampeluzzi and other anomalies around the world force science to abandon the categoricity of the past. What yesterday caused only laughter, today compels researchers to perform new tests and revise the limits of what is permissible. We have seen how common seeds in New Mexico or strange holes in Crete are capable of all at once adding millions of years to our history. This evidence is not a silent reproach to our self-confidence. They remind us, everything we know about our ancestors is just a thin layer of dust on the huge and still unexplored foundation of antiquity. The history of humanity is not a frozen set of dogmas. It is a living book. Every new expedition, every artifact in a deep mine or at the bottom of a dry lake can become a page that will cross out all previous chapters. Be prepared for the future to bring technologies capable of confirming definitively or refuting the boldest theories. We will continue to look for the truth where others see only ordinary stones. After all, it is exactly from these searches that the true picture of the world is formed. A world where reality proves to be much more exciting than any fantasy.